dashboard of contemporary literary production is compelled to break. In Greece, we often say that it's the language, or partly our cultural isolation, to blame. The case of Petros Markaris refutes this. What went right with him? Markaris simply found a way and pursued to step out initially from the introversion of the writer and secondly from his national identity, without, however, totally renouncing any of the two. By translating Goethe and Brecht from German as well as Hikmet from Turkish, Markaris does not merely break the boundaries. With language as his vehicle, he constantly goes through and through them by building bridges and not fences. So, which are the sizes which could limit the personality and authorial craft of Petros Markaris? A small publishing house, a small language, a small country, even at the moment in crisis? The question instantly arises, can an author breathe the reality of his country while at the same time he overcomes it? But let's start from the beginning. He is born in a multicultural city like Istanbul, from Armenian father and a Greek mother, and this is very important, believe me. He goes to an Austrian school and received German education. These are elements which define his personality. He is essentially trilingual and develops a deep sensation of not belonging anywhere. According to him, his own linguistic homeland is the language of his mother, a fact, however, which did not prohibit him in understanding and embracing his stepmother languages. His studies in economics and his related job never prevented him to read with passion, translate, and write. He regards Marx and Brecht as his teachers, philosophy, politics, arts, a mental pivot in which he constantly moves. He says that Marx provided him with the tools of political analysis and Brecht with the means of maintaining the distance of the observer. And this is proven in action. From his very first appearance in the Greek letters in 1965 with the play Allee, he makes an impression. The play is produced in Athens during the dictatorship, directed by the actors, thus abolishing the director's authority and following Brecht's theatre method. It was a collective effort which constituted an act of resistance, an act of rebellion, and which naturally caused the reaction of the regime. During the performances of the play, he meets Theo Angelopoulos, a faithful accountant. From their very first collaboration in the movie Days of 36, they make their mark and change the image of the Greek cinema landscape. The Hunters, The Suspended Step of the Stork, Ulysses' Gaze, Eternity in a Day, and the last film of Angelopoulos, The Dust of Time. Suffocating regimes, a rotten political system on the verge of dying without admitting, the lost pathways of history, the disorientation of the man from his course towards the ideal. These are their shared concerns, and on these they work, Angelopoulos with images, Markaris with words. He always has the acid gaze of the recording observer, and with a remarkable ideological consistency, he analyzes the events, while at the same time suggests and points the way towards the alternative route of education and culture. Furious personality, often frustrated and angry, has frequent explosions regarding the repeated historical and political mistakes, which he highlights without taking into consideration the consequences. Consciously or unconsciously, he advocates for Gramsci's stance, pessimism in thought, optimism in action. He foresees the negative developments, but never hesitates to act. So when in 1995 he decides to write his first novel, he desired and has the boldness to reset his socio-political concerns in an era after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Eastern Bloc. Greece went through the end of politics and the world the end of history. Markaris is aware that society, under the surface, remained deeply class divided and feels an obligation to himself as a political being not to be silent. He regards detective novels as an appealing way to talk about social issues and reality. He was taught that from the urban novel of the 19th century, as himself mentions, because this type of novel has very often a detective story or a crime story as a starting point. This is how Crime and Punishment was born, as well as Les Miserables, Dickens novels, and Zola. Initiating from an incident of detective nature, this author molded society. And in a way, this is how Kostas Charitos is born, who found shelter in Gavriilidis publications from the very first moment till today. Gavriilidis Publications was a small publishing house, and Markaris an unknown writer. Since then, many things have changed, and Gavriilidis became a cultural cell in the center of Athens, Markaris an international writer, and Charitos a famous detective. Charitos is not the stereotypical type of detective. He's not a genius, he's not a shadow, he's not corrupted. He is a simple, everyday, middle-class civil servant attempting to stay faithful to the letter of the law, but his peculiar romanticism often inhibits him. He disagrees with his wife, he's proud of his daughter, he's afraid of losing his job. He lives only by his salary, a fact which means that when Markaris started writing the trilogy of the crisis, he already has his hero. The author himself describes Charitos as an honest man with a tremendous stubbornness who in critical moments forgets his attribute and bypasses bureaucracy in order to do what he has to. Markaris focuses on Charitos' dialogues, written in a simple language with grains of philosophy that every man possesses. However, the element that provides Charitos with his special substance is his narrative, and we imagine him walk past us in Athens, Barcelona, Berlin. He may be Greek, but he's familiar to all Europeans. Officer meets daily the people of Athens, the young, the old, the students, the immigrants, the tourists, the unemployed, the intellectuals, the businessmen, the war refugees. Through them, Markaris succeeds from very early date in criticizing severely the crisis of values of the Greek society, the corruption, the tax evasion, the chauvinism, the religious bigotry, even the rise of the Golden Dawn. His deep political analysis and his appropriate distance from things that concern even himself supplies him with the ability of foreseeing. However, Markaris' books have yet another hero, Athens, not and the aura of the past. His readers will rarely bump into archaeological monuments and idyllic landscapes. Funnily enough, rarely in Markaris' novels is Acropolis mentioned. I'm sure this is not by chance. The representation of Athens is realistic as lived by its citizens, chaotic, complex, traffic jammed. The descriptions are vivid, meticulous, caustic. Charitos moves around from one point of Athens to other, commenting with irony and nostalgia. These districts and the picturesque neighborhoods, but also Athens of concrete and traffic chaos. He leaves nothing to fall to the ground. He continuously maps. It's a city of contradiction, he says, a city of fragments, and simply by walking on a central street, you come face to face with 4, maybe more Athens. Thanks to Charitos, Markaris shows his love for a city which used to be great and nowadays sinks under the concrete and the consequences of the financial crisis. The author breaks this stereotype as well and describes contemporary Athens. Without deconstructing the glorious past, he respectfully leaves it behind. Markaris knows how to cross the line and exceeds the magnitudes because he's not afraid to confront them. So, in 1997, after a proposition of the National Greek Theatre, Markaris takes on the task of translating Goethe's Faust, both parts. A vast work of 12,000 lines, mostly in verse and rhyme, a complex work, deeply reflective, a poetical labyrinth. It was his greatest confrontation with the translation, he will say. The sense of perfection emerging from reading Faust, as well as the sense of responsibility emerging of translating this text, are unique. It is the excessive admiration not only of the magnitude of the Goethe's poetry, but also for his knowledge and his wisdom. He completes the translation in 2002, after 5 years. His friend and publisher, Samis Gavriilidis, attempts to convince him to publish it. Both of them know perfectly well that in the effort lies a great risk concerning the existing Greek public scenery, but also a great bet. The difficulties are many and the printing transcendence is necessary, but thanks to his love for typography, Samis Gavriilidis manages so that the original text and the translation to be face to face in the pages, two cultures side by side in one book. The result justifies them. Faust in its Greek version is an elegant bilingual volume of 1,169 pages, 150 of which consist of commentary. For the first time, both parts of Goethe's Faust are translated into Greek. The first edition counts 1,050 copies, which are considered enough, if not many. The surprise was big and pleasant when in the very first semester, the first edition sells out. From 2002 onwards, Faust sells approximately 1,000 copies per year. If this is not an all-time bestseller, then which is? This was a bet won by everybody, because no culture is an island, and it never was. Fortunately, there were always people who dared to resist to division, isolation, and fear of the other. It's the universality not only of Faust, but of all classic works that abolishes the concept of ethnicity and enable us to feel part of the same total. It's always these people who dare to commune this universality. Closing. Markaris at some point stated that he passed in another level when he accepted that his personal space was European culture and not the specific culture of Greece, Germany, or Turkey. This fact helped him overcome the suspending condition of not belonging anywhere. When he decided that, this very same moment, he broke the chains and the boundaries that determine a man and was self-defined as a citizen of the world. It is not national identity that defined us, but education. In Brecht's Kafkasian Chalk Circle, there is a relevant passage by the narrator. Das da gehören soll, was das ist denen, die für es gut sind, ώστε εδώ να είναι και αυτό που εδώ βρίσκεται, σε αυτό που τα αξίζουν. Thank you very much. Danke.